thank you for stopping by on this YouTube channel. Thank you if you are a returning subscriber. If you are here to hit on the subscription button, please do where to do so. So today I'm going to be reacting to something really, I don't know what to call it. I'm reacting to history of white slave, forgotten history actually. The last time I reacted to how Britain ended the slave trade, and it felt like most of what they spoke about was about black slave, black slaves. And I'm seeing history of white slave. This is really serious. Like, this slavery issue, slavery topic is really a serious one. And the last video I did about how Britain ended the slave trade, I think a lot of people got the information I was trying to pass on that video wrongly. I'm anti-slave. I don't like the concept of slavery, and I was trying to point that out. Although that video really talked about black slaves and how blacks sold themselves out for slavery. So the emphasis was kind of blacks selling themselves out for slavery and black slave, and a lot of people got it wrong, or they got the information wrong. But let's see what this video has for us, and let's learn together, guys.
Slavery is as old as human civilization, dating back beyond recorded history, and it exists even still today. Every culture on every continent practiced some form of slavery, whether it was serfdom, indentured servitude, or collective peasantry. However, when the slave trade is mentioned, people normally think of the black African slave trade to the Western Hemisphere during the colonial period from 1500 to the mid-1800s, as practiced by the European colonial powers. Estimates range from 10 to 13 million Africans being brought to the New World, with around 10 million surviving to be sold in North and South America, as well as in the Caribbean islands. Of this number, the best estimate is that 450,000 went to the British, French, and Spanish colonies in what is now the United States and Caribbean. Brazil alone received almost 5 million, the rest going to the Spanish colonies in South America. Slavery still exists in the world, yet most of the major powers ignore the fact and refuse to even acknowledge that it still exists.
Oh, really?
It is still quite active. Yet, 6 decades before the American Civil War, a war was fought by the United States on foreign shores to try and stop the white slave trade.
Oh, wow.
What was the white slave trade? Does it still exist? Who were the Barbary pirates? What was the result of American intervention? How did it occur, and what was the aftermath? And how did 9 U.S. Marines and their mercenaries make history and give birth to a legendary fighting force while also ending the white slave trade in North Africa?
Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former soldier, Marine Corps scout sniper, history professor, historian and book author, and we will answer these questions and other issues on this segment of Forgotten History.
Wow. This is going to be tough, guys. Wow. I'm wowed.
During the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the world was on fire, as France and Britain were engaged in the Napoleonic Wars, which was another series of conflicts just like the 7 Years' War, again involving every nation in Europe. The 7 Years' War was also known as the French and Indian War in the United States.
Yes.
Both these conflicts were fought on every continent and on every ocean and in every colony. Even during these protracted wars, the transatlantic slave trade continued. It was big business. While the European powers were destroying each other, Thomas Jefferson became the 3rd President of the United States from March 4th, 1801 to March 4th, 1809, and he had several major issues to contend with. The Louisiana Purchase of 1803 from France doubled the size of the United States. The Yazoo territorial disputes in western Georgia were hotly contested. The launching of the Lewis and Clark expedition in 1804 to explore the newly acquired country, and the contested issue of slavery. In 1806, Jefferson denounced the international slave trade as a violation of human rights and called upon Congress to criminalize it. Congress responded by approving the act prohibiting importation of slaves the following year.
Wow.
No longer could slaves be brought from Africa, although slavery was still legal in the United States. Then there were also the rising tensions between the United States and Great Britain, which dominated the final years of Jefferson's second term, as the Royal Navy had been seizing American merchant ships and impressing sailors. However, one situation which has gone largely unnoticed in history was Jefferson being the first president to send the military overseas into direct action, the war against the Barbary pirates. For decades prior to Jefferson's accession to office, the Barbary Coast pirates of North Africa had been capturing foreign merchant and warships, stealing their valuable cargoes, and enslaving crew members, while often demanding huge ransoms for their release. Many of these ships and crews were American. Before independence, American merchant ships were protected from the Barbary pirates by the naval and diplomatic influence of Great Britain, which had threatened the use of military force should their ships be molested. However, that American protection came to an end after the colonies won their independence. The Barbary pirates also attacked the coastal northern Mediterranean, launching attacks against France, Italy, and Sicily, kidnapping women as white slaves, primarily and whenever possible, notable wealthy persons and ships for ransom. In their feverish search for white women slaves, a few pirates even went as far as the coast of Iceland, raiding inland to kidnap women and bring them back to North Africa. North African slave markets thrived, as, under Islamic law, known as Sharia, although fellow Muslims could not be enslaved, non-Muslims could be and were. Over a period of more than 300 years, it is estimated that 1 million white Europeans, to include those captured at sea as well as through land raids abroad, were enslaved. Many of these were Americans captured at sea. In 1794, in reaction to the attacks, Congress had passed a law authorizing the payment of tribute to the Barbary states. Part of that law was the Naval Act of 1794, which authorized the construction of 6 frigates, establishing the United States Navy. By the end of the 1700s, when Jefferson was Secretary of State, the United States had concluded treaties with all of the Barbary states, the Ottoman regencies of Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli, along with independent Morocco. When Congress authorized $80,000 for Morocco to not molest American shipping, it was considered a good deal, as it was a cost savings when compared to the loss of ships, cargo, and sailors. The Bey of Algiers, Mustafa Baba, also agreed, and many American merchantmen were escorted by Portuguese warships, as Portugal also had a treaty with the Islamic states. But Jefferson was opposed to paying tribute, which he considered to be a modern Danegeld. When Saxon England paid the Danish Vikings not to attack, it did not work. Although Morocco and Algiers initially agreed, just weeks before Jefferson took office, Tripoli began attacking American merchant ships in an attempt to extract further tribute. Jefferson had seen enough. Jefferson tried diplomacy, and his letter to Pasha Yusuf Karamanli emphasized, "Our sincere desire to cultivate peace and commerce with your subjects." Pasha Karamanli, the ruler of modern-day Tunisia, felt that the Americans had insulted him by not offering to pay tribute. He threatened continued actions if not so respected. Pasha Karamanli was already at war with Sweden, having broken an existing treaty after Sweden agreed to pay annual tribute and ransom for 131 captives. 14 Swedish merchantmen had been seized by Tripolitan corsairs. Some of these were white women who were being transported on Swedish merchantmen, and it is not known if they were ever recovered, as the white women were rarely ransomed. They were highly prized and sold. The Pasha then declared war on the United States on May 14, 1801 by chopping down the flagpole at the American consulate in Tripoli, a direct act of war. Jefferson sent 3 frigates and a schooner under the command of U.S. Navy Commodore Richard Dale as a show of force and to protect U.S. ships entering the Mediterranean through the Straits of Gibraltar. Dale learned of the declaration when he reached Gibraltar on July 1, 1801. From that point, Dale's ships blocked 2 of the Pasha's corsairs operating as raiders and messengers inside the harbor. Yusuf Karamanli was shocked at the American audacity. The Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, Selim III in Istanbul, was also less than amused, yet did not interfere when the Americans became involved. He had just concluded treaties with Russia and Austria and was trying to westernize his empire along Western lines. This included eliminating the white slave trade, and this position was not favored by many of his subordinate regional leaders, especially in North Africa, and they launched a revolt against him, and his cousin and successor, Mustafa IV, had him murdered in 1807. He was not about to give up such a lucrative business. The U.S. blockades halted Barbary trade and raids with Europe, but did not stop Tripoli's trade with the other Barbary states. It did, however, incite the other rulers, who considered siding with the Pasha, and they expelled their American diplomats. The United States was putting a major dent into their pirate enterprises, to include the white slave trade. The possibility of Tunis, Algiers, and Morocco joining forces as a result of losing this lucrative business became a serious concern during 1802, but in 1803, Captain Edward Preble was the new American naval commander, and he was aware of the white slave trade and piracy, and he began to deal with it. On September 12, 1803, the USS Constitution arrived off the Barbary coast to confront the Tripolitan pirates. In October 1803, the frigate USS Philadelphia ran aground and was attacked and seized, and the 307-man crew was held for ransom. In response, on February 16, 1804, a group under Navy Lieutenant Stephen Decatur slipped into Tripoli harbor after dark, boarded and set fires that destroyed the Philadelphia. The Pasha, in response, demanded an outrageous sum in ransom for his American hostages, even threatening death if it was not paid. In 1804, Commodore Samuel Barron, aboard the USS President, took command of 11 vessels, and he had new orders, but due to illness he handed command of the squadron to Captain John Rogers. Jefferson had again seen enough and decided to take direct and immediate action. He sent the order. Ex-Consul William Eaton, a former Army captain who used the title of general, and United States Marine Corps First Lieutenant Presley O'Bannon would lead a force of 8 U.S. Marines and 500 mercenaries to take Darna and free any hostages. These mercenaries were Greeks from Crete, Arabs, and Berbers, opposed to the regime, and started on a march across the desert from Alexandria, Egypt in April 1805. Their objective was to capture the Tripolitan city of Darna. The Muslim troops were under the command of Egyptian Sheikh El-Tahib, the Ottoman Empire viceroy. William Eaton, who was overbearing and not very friendly, kept himself aloof from his men and was in overall command but leading only half the group. He had a tough job controlling the largely undisciplined mercenaries, and the infighting between the Christian Greeks and Muslims, few of whom were professional soldiers, became a problem. His promises of money and loot once they took Darna was looked upon skeptically. However, O'Bannon and his 8 Marines embedded with their mercenaries shared food, hardship, water, and earned their trust. O'Bannon decided to take the Muslims from Eaton, exchanging them for his Greeks. The Marines built a strong fellowship by not denigrating the Islamic faith. They discussed their similarities and differences. O'Bannon also knew that many of these men had either been hostages themselves or had lost friends and family to the white slave trade. Eaton reported in May 1805, quote, "Our only provisions are a handful of rice and 2 biscuits a day," end quote. From March 22nd to March 30th, several Arab mercenaries, under the command of Sheikh Hamid el-Tahib, staged mutinies. By April 8, when he crossed the border into Libya and Tripoli, Eaton had quelled the Arab mutinies, but he could not stop the desertions. In late April, his army finally reached the port city of Bomba, some miles up the coast from Darna, where U.S. Navy warships USS Argus, Nautilus, and Hornet, with Commodore James Barron and Captain Isaac Hull, were waiting for him. Eaton received fresh supplies and the money to pay his mercenaries. Argus gave an additional cannon to the troops. On April 26, Captain Hull's ships then opened fire and bombarded Darna's batteries for an hour. Meanwhile, Eaton divided his remaining army into 2 separate attacking parties. The attack began at 14:45 hours, with Lieutenant O'Bannon and his Marines leading the attack with 50 inexperienced Greek gunners. Eaton's force was halted due to high volumes of enemy musket fire, but O'Bannon pushed his men through the inaccurate fire, as witnessed from the ships. Carefully interchanging his men into various ranks to fire, advance, reload, and continue the process, O'Bannon's force took the fort cannons. Eaton, wounded in the left wrist, would report later that O'Bannon, with his Marines and Greeks, had, quote, passed through a shower of musketry from the walls of houses, took possession of the battery, end quote. Eaton's forces caught up and turned the defenders' own abandoned guns against them, pushing them out of the city and into a well-placed ambush set up by O'Bannon just outside the main gate. During the entire battle, O'Bannon lost 2 men killed and 3 wounded Marines, with 9 of his mercenaries killed. Eaton's losses among the Muslims is unknown. O'Bannon raised the flag over the captured city at 1600 hours. They had just defeated a force 4 times their number, who were in a fortified defensive posture. And for the first time in American history, that a flag from the United States had been raised on foreign soil. Hostages were freed, and the Navy sank the pirate ships in harbor.
Wow.
Accurate naval fire from Argus and the other ships forced them back. and Darna remained in American hands. Yusuf reluctantly signed a peace treaty on June 10, 1805, aboard the USS Constitution. The treaty granted American ships passage through the Mediterranean without further payments of tribute and freedom from harassment. This also meant joining the other European nations in halting the very active and overt white slave trade. The war was over, and so was active white slavery from North Africa. Marine Corps legend has it that Hamet presented O'Bannon with a Mameluke sword, a sign of prestige and power. Emboldened by this event, more European nations also increased their naval presence and resisted the Barbary pirates, stopped paying tribute, crippling their commercial trade and extortion rackets, ending their raids on southern coastal Europe, ending hostage-taking and their demand for ransoms and the white slave trade. Presley O'Bannon and his 8 Marines had done the seemingly impossible, but it would not be the last time Marines were called upon to do the impossible and succeed. Semper Fi.
We hope you enjoyed this segment of Forgotten History. Please click like and subscribe for free. And please stay tuned and be engaged and informed. Send us comments if you have questions or even show ideas, and we will respond to all requests and comments as soon as we can. Thank you.
Wow. The exciting thing about this whole history of slavery is that every time there are bad people, there are always good people, regardless. Because bad people always have a reason to be bad. Because, I mean, their reasons for slavery was from religion to show of power and, you know, authority and wickedness and greed, most especially. Because this whole slave thing, the bottom line of it is greed, because people just want to make money by enemies, make money off people, make money by enslaving other people. Like, it's crazy. Selling a fellow human being that you know obviously this person is going to be used for very terrible, horrible things that you can't even think of, just to get money. It's greed at its peak. Like, that is greed at its peak. So it's always good to know that regardless if there's bad people, there are always good people. There are always people that still think right and want to do right at any cost. I mean, Obama, I don't know if I got that name correct. Obama and the president at the time, they did a whole lot of job. They did a lot of job to see that they actually put an end to this. I mean, this is a whole lot of sacrifice. This is a whole lot of sacrifice and a whole lot of selflessness you can see out there on display. And it's just so sad to know that slavery still exists up until now. Like he said it in the video, and many people were like, really, is that true? Actually, it is true. It exists in different form, and we may be shocked to know that it still exists as bad as it was then, but in a very secretive way. I don't have any disclosures to that. It's just what I feel, right? Because humans are actually very wicked, and so long there are humans on the top of the soil, wickedness will never stop to exist among humans. So anything is just very possible. And for the last video, I wasn't trying to fight anybody, because I understand that the concept of slavery can be done among anybody, whether you being black or white, because it boils down to humans. It's wicked humans carrying out the activity, because anybody who wants to do slavery for any reason, for greed, show of power, anything, and anybody could do it. Because even the last video I did, it was stated there obviously that black people gave up their own people out for slavery. So if you feel like I'm fighting the whites for slavery, then what are you going to say about me being angry for the blacks that gave up blacks? So you see, I wasn't trying to put up any fight there at all in the video. I wasn't trying. Maybe some persons have to go back and listen to it again or watch that video again. I wasn't trying to put up fight for anybody, because slavery, wickedness is a human thing. It's not about the skin color, skin tone, race, or anything. It's just a human thing, and I'll forever stay anti-slavery. And I hope you guys enjoyed this reaction with me. Please do well to hit the subscription button if you're yet to do so, and see you on my next reaction. Bye.